Okay, so the primary goal or the project or the problem statement of this project really for us is that at the moment there exists a situation where relatively fit, healthy people, relatively fit, healthy people are presenting with fairly small problems like a groin strain or just an aggravation from something, and those injuries are turning chronic in the form of osteitis pubis. What really we really want to do with this system is to develop some sort of tool that will help a physiotherapist to identify the underlying causes of that particular problem. By underlying cause, really what I'm talking about is that from talking to the physiotherapist, that all these sorts of problems have kind of a ground zero, have a starting point, that there's a reason for it, there's something in your routine, there's something in what you're doing that's setting off this particular problem at this particular time. And unfortunately, with this type of problem, that can be often ignored, and just the outlying problem is treated, whereas if you can get to the underlying root causes of this, you can stop this particular injury from going chronic. That's really the goal of what we want to do. In terms of the system, from talking to the physiotherapist, we've developed this kind of checklist that he would run through a patient, and that's really what he says would be useful to be able to store that type of information and to be able to go back and look over that information, and use that information to put a certain patient on a certain training program, because a lot of it is very much trial and error, and having that information and seeing what worked with one person or didn't work with one person is very useful to a physiotherapist. So in terms of the project, what we did was we talked to this particular physiotherapist, and he sat down with me and he went through a blow-by-blow account of exactly what he does when someone presents in the office to him. He first of all, he will obviously ascertain that they have pain in that area, and if they have pain in that any area around the groin at all, he will go off into this kind of mode where he's checking to see what the underlying causes of this are, because he's kind of thinking, I don't want this to turn into osteitis pubis. He goes through this kind of checklist. Are you playing sports? Have you changed your training surface recently? Have you moved from grass to the road, or have you changed your training program? Are you doing weights, or are you doing new stretching exercises, or have you changed your training footwear, or have you increased the intensity of your training recently? Gone up from 3 nights to 5 nights a week, or an hour to an hour and a half. And he basically reckons that most people that suffer this kind of onset of this kind of groin pain, it's coming from just doing too much. Maybe coming back from injury, or starting up, people starting up, activity again. They just go bullheaded into it, and instead of taking it easy, they go mad into training and cause themselves an injury. He says there's a lot of people presenting in his clinic at the moment, young kids that 14, 15, they're involved nearly in all the major sports, and they could be out 4 or 5 nights a week, and they're training too much, and that they're presenting with the early symptoms, the early signs of this osteitis pain. It's just a matter of digging into what they're doing in the routine to find out exactly why they're getting these particular problems. So that's really what we're trying to do. I think there was a little bit of confusion in the presentation, and maybe even within the group from the start, about exactly what we were trying to do. There was a bit of talk about identification today. Identification kind of has this ramification of diagnosis. I don't think we're trying to really design something that's going to perform a diagnostic tool. It's really an aid for a physiotherapist to gather this information, to allow him to go back over it whenever he feels like, and that kind of feeds into what I've heard from the course so far, that technology would be a useful kind of a complement to the knowledge base of the physiotherapist. So that's really the type of system that we're trying to design. As I said earlier, the motivation for it really comes from my personal experience of the problem. It's a frustrating injury, I think, for everyone, and one of the frustrating things just seems to be that lack of knowledge. And if the physio that I've worked with, he's kind of built up a good reputation as someone that knows a bit about it and has treated it to some sort of successful conclusion, but at the same time it's still very hit and miss, the treatment, and that's why what he does with that checklist is that he identifies these underlying cause that allows him to focus in on a particular muscle group or a particular movement in a person's routine, and that allows him to tailor a training program or a strengthening program or an exercise program, or a rehab program even, to get that injury right and to treat that underlying cause. I mean, I know from my experience I had problems on the left hip, so he tailored my exercise and stuff like that just for muscles in around that, and all the treatment was in around that area, whereas other physiotherapists just kind of they treated the site of the pain. They didn't really bother with the underlying causes and trying to strengthen the underlying causes. So that's how he would envisage using kind of a system to record the information and then and I think it was a useful critique of our presentation today that we didn't have a link between the problem identification and treatment table. I think that's important myself, that we kind of categorize what he finds in the list, in the checklist, and that guides to a certain exercise program or rehab program. So I think that's very important. The research element of the project, the others in the group would have had to gone off and done a bit of reading. I would have done a lot of reading when I had the injury. You just kind of search the internet looking for miracle cures, I suppose, at that point, and you come across a lot of interesting information, particularly from America and Australia and things like that. But most of the research for this particular project is coming from working with that physiotherapist, and he's been very helpful. He's actually in the process of putting together, when I went over to see him, he had a load of documents on the table about research he's doing, and trying basically to, I think he's doing a white paper or something on basically trying to build awareness of this problem at the local level. And that's really, so to sum up all that, what we're really trying to do here is to develop a system that will help the physiotherapist to record these underlying symptoms, or not underlying symptoms, these underlying causes of why that person is getting this particular groin injury at this particular time in their life, and hopefully that will give him information to put that person onto a successful treatment program, or to see maybe why the treatment program is not working, or however he decides to use it. But the point is that it gathers that underlying information. Okay, here I just demonstrate the Java tables run. I'm going to run an insert and a search of the patients table just for time. So the system that I developed, you press 1 to enter a new patient. So enter an email, is just I don't know, Harry at aircom.ie. To the first name, obviously Harry Rooney, date of birth, and the phone number on it. So when I commit that, I should go to PHP My Admin, and if I look at the patients, sorry, if I refresh it first, if I look at the patients table, then I should see Harry Rooney added to the table, and there's Harry Rooney, so he's been added to the table. So I go back into NetBeans and I select 2, which is to search the table. I've just entered patient, so I'll just copy and paste his email address into the system, and you can search for any particular variable that you wanted, date of birth, whatever. And again, that displays it here, displays the first name, which is Harry, displays the surname, which is Rooney, displays the phone number, which is 087-666. So that's basically a very simple insert and a simple search of the system. It does the same for the other 3 tables. I had a little bit of trouble with the problem identification table, I'm not quite sure why, but that's basically a start. So now just a quick word on the code itself. As I said in class today, I basically set it up in a do-while loop. I actually should have demonstrated the system actually ending. If I go back down here, if I press X, that will stop the system. So that stops the system. So I've set up basically a do-while loop. So obviously with a do-while loop you have to do something. So I come in here, you choose 1 to 6 or X, then the system. Just here, this is obviously the X. We've ignore case, which basically just ignores case. You can put in, you don't have to capitalize and things like that. So if it's 1, you call the insert patients method. If it's 2, you call the search patient method, and so on. 3, 4, 5 and 6 are the same. They all call the individual methods. Come down here to the while. That ends the do while when you don't choose something. So into the methods themselves, obviously insert patient, you get the details here, email, first name, last name, date of birth, phone number, and that brings it into you check to see that there's nobody in that table already with the matching characteristics that you just entered above. And if that's okay, if that doesn't work, obviously it'll bring you back, but if everything is okay, it's a valid patient that needs to go into the database. Is entered here with a little bit of SQL that matches up to the PHP My Admin tables, and that enters the person, and search patient. kind of works again. You can enter, I've entered an email here, search, it's looking for an email, but you could do it with an ID number or phone number or date of birth or whatever you wanted to search for. So select all from patients where email is equal to whatever is entered up here. So that comes down, uses the code that you gave us. It's basically an object of the prepared statement, or an instance of the prepared statement object. Comes down here and it checks everything, and it prints it out here. Display first name, so you're just getting a string. And it'll be get int, maybe for result, or get int is for the phone number. So again here, this will alert you if it's not registered. This should tell you. Again, the other methods are quite similar. Insert app, quite similar, and search the application. That's search appointment, and insert physio and search physio. So they're all basically very similar to the main two at the top. So that's basically a quick run through the Java code. As I said earlier, for probably just ease of time more than anything else, I kept this up here fairly simple. I did tie with the idea of creating a kind of an option to go into one table, and then inside that method to call the other methods, either to add or to search. So up here you'd have a choice to go into the patients table, and then within the patients table itself you could call the methods to add or to do a query. Also tied with the idea of having a login. We might want to have a login from the physio at some stage. Obviously your system is not going to be just wide open for somebody to come in, but just due to time constraints, I just kept it fairly simple to the six options in the insert and the search. So that's the Java code. Okay, so here I've just taken one of the class diagrams that we have. It's not actually the one that went up on the slides today, because my version of the one that was up on the slides today is actually very, very hard to read in this type of format. So if you can ignore this table here, which we've taken out, this table here should have been in the presentation today but wasn't. It was just a little bit of a drawing difficulty, but it will be in the table going forward. I don't think it's a massive thing anyway. Basically the structure of the database, obviously we have healthcare, we've physio, we've patients, we've appointments, we've problem ID, and we've the treatment plan. Obviously, as you've seen today, it's well done in terms of primary keys and foreign keys matching. I mean, for example, here in the patients table, you're going to have a primary key of the patient ID, which is going to travel into the appointments table. It's going to become a foreign key. The healthcare staff is going to become a foreign key in there as well. And that appointments table is going to need to, that's actually not reflected in this particular version, but it's going to need to reference. So the appointment number is going to have to travel over here to the problem identification table as a foreign key. As I said earlier on about the link here between problem identification and the treatment plan, we're probably going to need to have something here, to reflect the training category, or a problem identification category, which is probably going to travel as a foreign key into this one, so that, or maybe even a junction table between these two. I think we had some sort of version of that a couple of weeks ago that would lead you then into certain treatment A or treatment B, or whatever the plan needs to be. I think here in this particular relational diagram, you can see better the relationship of foreign keys, primary keys, the child and parent relationships in the tables. As I said, we might have to think about adding maybe a junction table between the problem identification and the treatment plan table to try and make it all a little bit better. I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to talk to finish off about maybe selling the system. I think that the benefits of the system, as I've said, from my point of view, would be looking at the system. What we're really trying to do is to help a physiotherapist to record this underlying causes, which as you can see are in this table here. Probably should have mentioned that it's a very important table. Contains most of the information about the checklist, which is possibly not totally correct just at this moment in time. That yes/no scenario gives a good idea of what we're trying to do, but I think that's really the gist of the system. We're trying to record information. We're trying to, use this as a tool for the physio rather than trying to be diagnostic in any way.